Before getting on to the court decision, could I get you to sort of briefly explain how the rent control policy works and how it was working?
Well, yeah, of course, it was working for more than a year. And you did explain a bit about it already. Like the first part of the rent cap was the rent stop. So no one saw any rent raises, or almost all tenants in the city did not see any rent raise within the last year, which is great, or which was great already. Like a lot of people were already very much used to getting raised like every 2 or 3 years, as it was is regulated by federal law. Then you have the reduction of rents in new contracts. So if you were looking for a new flat and the landlord had to stick to prices regulated by the government when they were giving you when you were signing the contract. Plus, as you said, we had a reduction of rents in existing contracts starting from last November. We are estimating in effect for more than 300,000 households in the city. And in terms of its effectiveness, we did see that for the first time in, I don't know, more than 10 years, we did not have raising rents statistically in the city. The first time that rents were actually going lower than the year before. And we also saw some lower sales prices for residential buildings. So some of what we wanted to do was actually already showing effect after 1 year, that people were having lower rents, and we were also starting to influence the speculation in housing prices and in houses in the city.
And this decision by the Constitutional Court, I mean, it must have come as a big blow to you guys. Do you interpret it as a political attack on your policy, or is this just judges who are, honestly giving their interpretation of the Constitution? I mean, what's your assessment of how this decision was made?
Well, usually it's not good form to criticize judgments, especially of the Constitutional Court. So let's just say that we were disappointed and surprised, because before the decision, there was like ample evidence and lots of legal arguments also in support of our decision, or our position that the federal states in Germany also have the possibility to regulate the rent market. The states do actually have a lot of competence, for example, for building social housing. And this was a competence given to us by the federal states in 2006. So our argumentation was, okay, this is we have the power as states to legislate rents as well. That this is this argument was not followed by the Constitutional Court, and I would say that means two things. First thing is, then it's the necessity of the federal level that they regulate rents better than they used to. There's lots of holes in the tenant protection regulations on the federal level, and this is a big issue and a big challenge politically for the federal level. And the second is that politically and practically for tenants in the city, we are back to square one, so to say. We are back to a situation that we had 1.5 years ago, where people could barely afford to pay rents, especially if they were just moving into the city or just had to move to a new flat, and were afraid of the next raise. And this is a situation that we will have to tackle again, and we will take up the challenge, of course, together with a lot of the tenant initiatives in the city that were, for example, yesterday demonstrating spontaneously on the day of the ruling of the Constitutional Court. There were more than 10,000 people in the streets of the city. And I think that was a powerful sign that the tenants movement is back on the streets, and will also argue and fight for different and better regulations. And the fight is not over, I would say.
Well, does this all mean that the fight now moves to the federal level? And of course, there are federal elections. this year. So it's potentially the case that we could have a new government in Germany, a red-green alliance like you have in Berlin, and they could put in their manifesto nationwide rent controls. Is that the next front in this battle for housing justice?
I would say it's one front, definitely. We will, as you said, we will have a federal election in Berlin, in Germany. We also have state elections in Berlin. And we also have a referendum campaign in the city that argues for the expropriation of big housing companies. So there's lots of arenas to fight this battle. And I think that, of course, the fight moves on the part of the fight will have to move to the federal level. This is where we could easily implement a rent cap for bigger cities in all over Germany, or the federal level could open up the legislation, like by law for cities and states to do so. And I think this is definitely going to be an arena. And the second part is, of course, we will. This does not mean that we will stop trying to regulate rents or to influence the housing market in the city. The expropriation campaign is one part of the movement, of the tenants' movements. That is, I think, very important at the moment. But also, apart from that, I think one of the big things that we are still working on here in the administration is to raise the share of public housing and of cooperative housing in the city. And this is something that we will have to go on, and that we are planning to go on.
Wenke Christoph, thank you so much for your insight. And I have to say, I really hope you get this back on track in Berlin, because we need the example, because I am so desperate to get rent controls in London, and we need to point to some successful cities in Europe where you've done it, and we can say, now let's do it now. So our fingers crossed.
Thank you.